Good evening, punters, and welcome to another episode of the TryPod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a betting perspective. And another winning weekend in round 11 of the NRL. It's been a while since we've had a losing weekend indeed, and I think we'll start with, I think we're going to have a few more listeners this week just because of the fact that we posted that epic, and if you haven't seen it, we posted an epic same game multi from Sportsbet from the Thursday night game, Eels Tigers, that won $71,000. It was, if you haven't seen it, was for Luciano Leilua to score the first try, and it was for Mitch Moses to score a try in the first half, and the Tigers to be Tigers plus 10.5 in the first half. A ridiculous multi, paying I think about $1,400, $50 on that. $71,000, and a lot of people, I guess, and it happens all the time. I mean, I remember even back when I posted one of my own multis that would have been about 4 or 5 years ago, where we won 22 grand of $100 on a Bet365 multi, and it seems like every time someone wins a big multi that pays 5 figures or more, everyone is quick to sort of jump on the bandwagon and call it fake. Let me just say, this one's definitely not fake, and I'll tell you what else. If you've seen our Photoshop skills, you'd know that there is zero chance that we would be able to make a bet slip that looked real, that wasn't in fact real. But that was certainly an epic multi, and that was won by a close friend of the pod, and we gave the tip out to him.
That's right. The person's going to remain anonymous, but it's someone from the inner circle, and it was pod tipped, and everyone calls every big win fake. And a lot of people said that one in particular was fake because the odds didn't seem to add up. But one thing you need to understand with the same game multis, of course, they're not all independent events. So you don't just simply get the product of all the legs multi together with the odds. And if anyone's played around with same game multi odds, a lot of the time they're going to completely rip you off, and you're going to multiply several legs, and you're not going to get near the odds you should. And if you play around long enough, every now and then you can get something that reflects what can be a really good bet, which this one was. And I know that people are a little bit disappointed that it wasn't tipped by the pod. You guys have seen some of our really ambitious same game multis in the past, but you can explain, Alex, why that, it's really actually not possible for us to share 1,000 to 1s every week as much as we'd love to.
And we do give out big multis, and obviously, I think every single year that we've done this, whether it be NFL or NRL, we have hit I think around 100 to 1 or higher on multis. But yes, there is a caveat in the Sportsbet terms and conditions, and we don't actually realize this until, a couple of months ago. And it says that, if a bunch of people are on the same bet, they'll only pay out $500,000 max. So, if we gave this bet out, let's say, and, all of our followers put $1 on it even, or not even, let's say they all put...
500 people put $1 on it.
If 500 people put $1 on it, then you wouldn't actually, you're not actually getting paid out the full amount. So it is very tricky. And also...
And on top of that, they reduce the odds each time. It's built into the kind of calculator as well. So when someone places it at 1,400 to 1, the next person might put those same selections in, and it might come up at 900 to 1 or whatever, and diminishing. So there's really nothing in it for the people who create the multi, which is us, and there's nothing in it for you guys. And I know people are saying, I don't mind if it's 100 to 1, I'll take it if it's a winner. But of course, you have to understand in the long run, a same game multi that, if you're getting 100 to 1 on something that might win once every 1,000 times, it's not a good bet, where it might be if you can get over $1,000. So I know some people were pumped to see it. Other people were very skeptical, but after 6 years, we've never, tried to mislead or made anything up. What you see is what you get with us. This week, another great winning week. And I could make the case, 8 games, we nailed all 8 with how we said they would play out, even though we didn't bet on 2, which landed right on the line.
Yeah.
So it pretty much showed we knew there wasn't too much value. And the 2 games we lost money on really felt like we predicted how it would play out. We just got a bit unlucky.
And honestly, we'll start with the Thursday night game. And it was the Eels beating the Tigers 26 points to 16. And it's funny, like, it's become a little thing in our group where, like, you know, if we disagree on a side, Jacob, then, you know, you bet basically right around where the exact margin or where the line is, or bet on the exact margin, and sometimes that's where it'll land. And that's happened, you know, numerous times this year. And for this first game, you know, we didn't have a best bet on the game. And it's probably one of those ones where you probably should go right around the margin, because it did land 10. And, you know, if you wanted to, you could have got plus 10.5 with the Tigers. If you wanted to, you probably could have got minus 9.5 with the Eels, I think. But this was a really interesting game. I think both teams were absolutely up for this one, especially the Tigers. You know, I thought they were the better team in the first half, definitely. They had a lot more possession in the first half. But there was always going to be some feeling in this one after the comments that came out, you know, during the week and in the lead up to the game. You know, and Tigers were up, I think, 12-6.
12-4.
12-4. And then, well, 12-6. And then I think, you know, they had the broken play. Regan Campbell-Gillard streaks away for that try, which was, you know, to be honest, a little bit lucky off the offload. And then from that point on, I really do think that the class just, you know, showed from the Eels. They do have, you know, a lot more talent on that roster. And the Tigers, just the way that they're constructed, they're not really made to chase points. But, you know, I'd say that the Eels certainly deserved this one. They were the better team for the back half of that one, but it was a really quality game.
Yeah, after an awful start against Manly last week, it wasn't a great start with Luciano Leilua scoring in the second minute of the game. As I said, Tigers got up to 12-4, and you could see they were bang up for it. But the game was flipped on its head by that 50-metre try to a front rower in Campbell-Gillard, who was excellent for the entire match. The Eels scored 4 tries in a row. They ended up getting out to 28-12 by, you know, midway through the second half. And the Tigers got a late try, but pretty much the Eels controlled it. It was an impressive bounce-back win for the Parramatta.
It was indeed. Let's move on to the Friday games, and the early one is the Sea Eagles beating the Cowboys 24 points to 12. We did just have the single best bet on that one. We laid the 2 points with Manly, and that one got up, obviously. Look, I thought the Cows were not terrible in this one. We kind of wondered how they would feel after Paul Green, you know, leaving the club, and if you'd get that little bit of a bump from the players. But I thought that they weren't down for this one necessarily. They weren't dejected or anything like that. I thought the Cows played decent, but this is more about Manly actually, you know, really improving, I think. I know that they've had, you know, injuries to Turbo, injuries to Dylan Walker, but I'll tell you what, Cade Custer's come into his own there in the halves, and he's starting to look really good. And you know, a little known thing, not little known, but I mean, Fanua Blake has been awesome for this Sea Eagles team. He's been out. He comes back this week. 225 meters in 51 minutes. That's Taumalolo-like numbers, you know? So I think, you know, not enough people were talking about that, but he is certainly a huge addition to that forward pack. And look, this Manly Sea Eagles team, I know that they've had a rough season, a lot of injuries, but they're starting to come together and they're starting to string a few wins together and getting a little bit of confidence. Daly Cherry Evans is playing better, and I think, you know, he was trying to do a bit too much, but I think, you know, Cade Cuss now is starting to look decent there in the halves, and I think it takes a lot of pressure off Cherry Evans. And I think, you know, despite all these injuries, Manly is looking decent down the stretch here. Yeah,
the games where Manly has struggled, Cherry Evans looked like he was trying to do it all on his own. So
right.
You're right, Cuss, probably best game of his career, really helped. Manly had the look about them that they went up to Townsville knowing that they're a legit top 6 team, if not better, and expecting to win the game. And with Adam Fanua-Blake, and you love when you get a player back off suspension because you know he's not back off injury and he hasn't like been hampered in what he can do in training and he's not going to be underdone. And he was raring to go, as you said. I think he was man of the match, led the way. And yeah, Manly's a quality team, got a quality win. The Cowboys are limited in attack, to say the least, and they're not a quality team, and they were never really too close in this one.
No, they weren't. And let's move on to the game that I actually went to. It was the Friday night game. It was the Storm beating the Broncos 46 points to 8. We just had the single best bet on that one. It was no try in the first 7.5 minutes. That was over very quickly when they scored within a couple of minutes. But the Storm just too good in this one, and I don't really know how much I can take out of this game from a betting perspective. Honestly, I was there. It started drizzling. That's the reason that we played this. It started, we thought that it would rain and teams would take the 2. It would be a bit lower scoring. And it did start to drizzle at the beginning of the game. And I was sitting there and I was like, this is going to be absolutely grim. I'm going to watch the Storm just obliterate the Broncos in the wet. But then, the Broncos score a try. They level it up. They kick the penalty goal to go up 8-6. And, that's after 25 minutes. The Storm were not on at the start of that game, that's for sure. And, you started to believe a little bit. Maybe you could have the biggest upset in a while here. But at the end of the day, the Storm were just too clinical once again. And the Broncos the effort is really not there. They're up 8-6. You're in a close game. And as soon as things don't go their way, it really spiraled for them. But I don't really know what I can take out of this. The Storm were just too good.
You said you started to believe the Broncos could win, so obviously you had a fair few beers slightly at the game, mate.
It was 25
You started to believe you're a fairy
in.
princess. This was, of course, the first of two huge losses for Brisbane this weekend. The news out yesterday that Fafita is not going to re-sign there. He's off to the Gold Coast on a bigger deal, but it really is an indictment on how horrible this year has been, that he doesn't want to stay in a team that every team in the competition envied, the young talent that was on this Broncos side. And probably the most talented of all is going to be playing in a different jersey next year. So that's really tough to take. And when I said this top of this pod, I feel like we nailed our handicap of every game. We basically haven't bet a no-try first 7.5 or 8 minutes for the whole season. But we thought Brisbane will show up with effort. It's going to be poor conditions. We were right. The Storm scored one try in the first 35 minutes. And it was, unfortunately, after 90 seconds, off a grubber kick that went through Milford's legs.
Yep.
And then they didn't score again for over half an hour. So pretty unfortunate for us. And Brisbane, as you say, they led 8-6. And if you bet like Storm minus 19.5, like you didn't think it was happening given the weather conditions and the Broncos' effort. But I tell you, the killer blow was letting Hughes score. It was 8-8. It was 34th minute. And Jerome Hughes gets the ball, nothing on. He literally skips backwards and then just lulls the defence to sleep and goes through untouched. And you saw heads drop. It was 8-8. It finished 46-8.
Unreal.
So once again, just another horrible night for Brisbane and clinical Storm second half.
Indeed it was. And let's move on to the Saturday games. It was the Roosters beating the Warriors 18 points to 10. We had 3 best bets on this one and we won all 3. A lot of people were laughing at us.
No fear.
Yeah, no fear. A lot of people were laughing at us taking the Warriors after they, were putrid last week. But we did think that they would show up, in their last game with the band together. Fusatua, Mamalo, Parsi-Eel, those guys are going back home to New Zealand this week. And they really did show up. They were up at halftime. They're up 10-4 at halftime. And, at that point, Jacob, were you starting to believe that they could actually have a win here? That's the way it looked. They were good. They were really good, this New Zealand team. And, it's a tough one to kind of handicap from a betting perspective, because is this the way that the Warriors are going to play moving forward with a lot of heart, really put in for the full 80 minutes in this one? Or was it just, one of those games where it's like, the guys are leaving next week, let's put in one last really good effort, which is what we thought they would do and is what they did, and then maybe have a little bit of a letdown next week. But, from a Roosters perspective, I'm not going to take too much away from them. They knew that they were going to win this game. Boyd Cordner gets scratched before the kickoff. The Warriors were really up for this one. So, look, I'm not downgrading the Roosters for not covering this one. It's a wet, relatively slippery conditions over there. But props to the Warriors. But I just don't know if, this is necessarily a game where you say, all right, the Warriors played so awesome this week, it's going to happen again next week. I do have that inkling that maybe it just was, let's get up for this one last game.
Well, I always talk about how the start is so crucial for the Warriors, and it was a nightmare start last week against Cronulla, and things just snowballed. And in this game, you could tell they were up for it. And the Roosters only scored 1 try in the first half. It was off a bomb where I would argue Fusitua's legs are taken out from under him. He spills it, and the Roosters score. And, the video ref looks at it, first of all, calls Fusitua Marmelo, so it's only the best winger in the competition, but you don't know his name. And I feel like that epitomizes that they're not respected.
Yeah.
The video ref is watching it. I'm going to rant a little bit about the video ref on the Saturday games, but he's watching it and it's like, oh, it's the Roosters versus the Warriors. The Roosters are meant to win. I mean, we're trying to protect players, but you're jumping for the ball and you get hit below the hip, but they're saying it's a contest. As I said, that was the only try they conceded first half. They're still up 10-6. What absolutely shits me to tears was what happened in the second half. They've got the lead. The Roosters are throwing it around on 5th tackle. Brett Morris is getting tackled near the goal line. a million times out of a million, when he reaches that long right arm out holding the ball, he is offloading it back to his teammates, because if he gets tackled, it's a turnover. The Warriors go to try and stop the offload, and they call it a strip, and they challenge the call, and the bunker looks at it and is telling me that they've stripped the ball. Well, what are you meant to do when he's offloading it and he's got the ball away from his body in one hand, trying to throw it backwards? Like, oh, my mind was blown. What happened? The Roosters got a repeat set. The Roosters scored the try that put them in front. Now, at the end of the day, the Warriors didn't score second half, and you have to give some credit where it's due. The Roosters, they didn't have Cordner. Their defense was really good. They contained Roger. I will also say the Warriors contained Teddy. And the Warriors back row, you got Eli Katoa, Tohu Harris, and Jazz Tavanga. A couple of those guys haven't been there for most of the games. That's actually a legit back row. So the Warriors, it's going to be a week-to-week proposition on which team shows up, but they showed promising signs. And for the Roosters, Robbo will be happy to gut that one out, because if you didn't see the game and you just saw 18-10, that it was far from an easy win for the Roosters. There was a real chance the Warriors could have upset them in that one.
And before we move on to the next game, props to the Eels. They've lent a couple of players to the Warriors to get through this tough time when they've got a few of their guys going back home. They've got Jennings going over there and Alvaro. So props to the Eels for doing that. Let's move on to the next one. It is the Sharks beating the Dragons 28 points to 24. We were all over the Dragons in this one, and it was a pretty brutal way to lose this one. We had a lot of bets on the Dragons. Even all three could have very easily won in this one, and it was just a crazy game. I mean, there's 6 tries in the fucking first half. I really thought that the Dragons were just as good, if not better, in this one. I don't think that the final score reflected the Sharks being any better than this Dragons side. Even the Sharks, like, first try is like a lucky deflected kick kind of thing. The Dragons...
Hang on, you got to go into it a little bit more than that. It's not a lucky deflected kick. They didn't touch the ball. They looked at it in slow motion 10 times and awarded a try a player who didn't touch the ball. It's the first time it's probably ever happened in history. And they got stood down this morning.
I know. I knew that you wanted to go on a rant, so I'm not going to go on. I'm not going to go on the rant. I knew you were going to go on the rant, so I'll let you do that after. You can...
Well, don't bury the lead, mate. Anyway, carry on with what happened after that.
Anyway, look, and the Dragons scored what is, I would say, like one of the try of the year contenders. And I'll tell you what, Dufty has been a godsend for that team. We've been saying about this Dragons team all year long. Kind of, obviously they had, the halves there with Ben Hunt, Corey Norman. Not this game, but, at the start of the season, we're saying these guys aren't really... awesome playmakers of any kind. And they've got Dufty in there. He's really added a spark to the attack. And I'll tell you who else has really improved, Jacob. I know that you were saying, last year maybe Lomax is the worst fullback in the comp. At centre, he has really gone to another level now. He's really, really solid. A couple of tries in this one, and he's been very solid for this Dragon side. So I think they're just going to keep improving. But I'll let you tell everyone why the Dragons should not have won this one. It's lost this one.
Well, I kind of said it there, and look, I will try and be fair, okay? It's an absolutely garbage, ridiculous bullshit call, and I've got no idea what goes through the bunker's head to give a try to a player who didn't get up celebrating, didn't think he scored, with good reason because he didn't. But the Dragons' first try was off a strip in the act of scoring, which is pretty lucky. And it bounces to Fumeono and he scores. And Ramian scored a try in the first half that was disallowed, and it was a questionable obstruction at best. I actually had another issue. You talk about one of the tries of the season. I agree, and I've loved the new rules suit Dufty down to the ground, and Lomax has grown an extra leg. He's been awesome. I've loved watching it, right? There was a questionable, whether I think it was Dufty had held the ball in the play the ball of that try. And Wade Graham's blowing up Deluxe in Atkins' ear, and Atkins is going, and he's saying, let me challenge it. I tell you what, he absolutely planted a seed, because that try put him up 6 or 8. The Dragons basically didn't get the ball for the next 20 minutes. He gave them 5 repeat sets in a row. Sean Johnson absolutely had a field day and carved them up. And when he's getting go forward and he's getting space, he is as good as any player in the competition in attack. And I really feel like Atkins was trying to square up by giving the Sharks every little edge he could. But, again, I'll put my hands up and say, am I biased better? But I really felt like the Dragons were just given no opportunity in that game for that 20-minute period where every single Sharks set ended up on their try line. When they finally got the ball back, they cut it to 28-24 and agonizingly close. We've got two different kicks where they're, a knock-on away and a really half-decent chance to score the winning try. And that's the difference between winning and losing for them. And it's the difference between going 2-1 or 0-3. So when I say we got the game right, we thought it would be a tight game. We thought the Dragons shouldn't be the underdog. I feel they should have won that game, but I know it was close. And what's sad, it was actually a cracking game.
Oh, yeah.
And here we are whinging and talking about, a mind-boggling bunker decision, but it was a bad one.
But you're right. It is like, at some point, people are always like, oh, it's a cracking game, but we're arguing about the bunker decisions. You shouldn't have to argue about the bunker decisions. They have a million fucking, video angles. They need to be able to get these calls right 99 times out of 100. Let's move on to the Raiders beating the Rabbitohs 18 points to 12. We did not have any best bets on this game. We just thought, the line was pretty much right. The Raiders were 5.5 point favourites. It was in Canberra. Nice, cold weather for Canberra, and we thought that Canberra was a slightly better team. And look, to be honest, from a punting perspective, I don't think there's anything that I can really take out of this game. I think they're two underrated teams that we've said, we want to bet on for the remainder of the season. And I think they played that way. I think it was a grand final type intensity game. Very even game. I thought that the Rabbits probably didn't deserve to lose by 6 points, to be fair. I can argue that the Raiders' first couple of tries were pretty lucky. Some lucky tries off kicks and stuff like that. But, in saying that, it's another win for the Raiders, a bit more confidence for them after, everyone was kind of writing them off after the first, few rounds of the season. But in saying that, I still think that these two teams are a little bit underrated in the marketplace, and they are still teams that I want to bet on moving forward.
But of course, you want to know the severity, and I don't know if you've heard, both teams lost their fullbacks, so Johnston and Nickel Clockstad. So I'm not sure how long either of those two are out.
But Latrell's back next week, right?
Yet. Yeah, Latrell back is definitely going to help the Rabbitohs, who were really tough and didn't go away. They were really gutsy. But once again, it's a close but no cigar, and it's key injuries. And that's been like kind of the Rabbitohs season, to be fair. Now, the Raiders, they get another gutsy win. This week, they signed Harawira and Naira. And we now know that Johnny Bateman is not far away. So you're adding those two, and then your big question mark on the Raiders is, can they replace Hodgson? And while you can't fully replace him, Havili is quietly the Raiders' answer to Brandon Smith. Yep. He starts at 9, and then he can go in and play middle forward like a nugget. And then you got Starling, who's a real talent, to come on and play rake after that. So I agree. I'm not going to downgrade the Rabbits on that performance. It was bitterly cold and wet and really tough for both teams. Latrell back helps, but it just could be one of those years for the Bunnies.
Indeed it could. Let's move on to the early game today. It was the Bulldogs beating the Knights 18 points to 12. We did have two best bets on the ugly Bulldogs, and we did get both of those best bets up in this one. If you're not in our Facebook group, TryPod Punters Tips Forum, please hop on over there, because there was a poor bloke that said that he would, if the Knights lost to the Bulldogs, he would knock on his neighbour's door naked and film it. So if you'd like to see that, hop into the TryPod Punters Tips Forum Facebook group. But look, I kind of said this in the preview. It was a little bit of a letdown spot, and possibly a letdown spot for the Knights here. They'd played 3 really tough, close games against really good teams, and they had a tough look ahead next week. And now you play the lowly Bulldogs, kind of think you're going to get an easy victory. And honestly, that's exactly how it looked in this one. They were not up for this one. They're going to be spewing that they're out of the top 4 now, I think, after losing this one to the Dogs. But the Dogs are really solid, and honestly, it's like, it's a cliche, but they are a wet weather team. They've got good forwards. They, don't have any good playmakers, which doesn't matter in the wet weather. And they just got on top of them early, and the Knights, they were pushing to get back in it late in that game, but just couldn't quite do it. And I think, moving forward, there's some teams where, like you see the Storm play in the wet weather, and they're just absolutely clinical. And, I don't know if this is just a one-off or not, but this Knights team, they really just didn't know what they were doing out there in the wet. It didn't seem like they could string anything together. So, it's just a one-game sample size from this game. But I think, if you ever see a game again where the Knights are actually playing in some wet weather, it's going to be tough to back them.
Well, in general, I don't want to back any favourites in pouring rain. Sure. And that's the lesson from this round. And there were 4 big favourites this round. We only liked one of them. We liked the Storm. We gave the Broncos no chance. We didn't back the Storm because of bad weather. Now, they won anyway. But I can live with not being on the store minus 19.5. As I said before, you didn't want any part of that bet after half an hour in that game.
True.
And one of the reasons we loved the Warriors, the Dogs, and the Titans was wet weather makes it harder to obviously hold the ball, harder to offload, harder to throw long passes, so it limits attack. So it makes it harder to score points. Therefore, the plus points you get are more valuable. Now, got to give you credit, and you won our side bet because we both liked the underdogs today, but I liked Titans more than Dogs, and you liked Dogs more than Titans. Dogs performed better than Titans, getting the outright win. So you've clawed one back there. When you said you love the Dogs, I should have known you were onto something hot there because you never loved the Dogs. But you're right, bucketing rain, and I think they made no more than 2 errors in the whole first half, maybe just one, like 90% completion first half.
I don't think they had an incompleted set in the first half.
Yeah, that Avarillo where he could have scored the tries, technically an incomplete set where he knocked it on. But they led 6-0 at half time. It was a really rough first half for the Knights. They lost McCulloch to a hammy rupture and then Connor Watson to an Achilles. Really sad. You saw him jerk his head back. He thought someone had kicked him in the back of the leg. That's the feeling when an Achilles pops. And they lost Jaden Brayley in round 1. So that's your first 3 number 9 options. And Kurt Mann went in there and they did come back. And maybe in the future, Mann's got to play the 9. He's a bit of a Mr. Fix-It. And maybe Tex Hoy can play the 6. But it's still really rough when you lose your 3 first-choice hookers. The Dogs, as you said, looked in their element. They were actually up 18-0 in this game. And just like last week, they nearly blew it. They were up 12 last week, and we know that they conceded 18 straight. Well, in this one, they were up 18-0. It was back to 18-12. They had to bloody hold on against the Knights' fight back. But, not good enough for the Knights. They looked like a fish out of water, and they haven't won back-to-back games since round 1 and 2. Since the COVID break, they've had some good games, but they've lost to the Cows and the Sharks. I feel like they're not at the level that they believe and aspire they should be at, and with the injuries, maybe they won't reach it this year.
Indeed. You make a good point about Kurt Mann. He did look fine at the 9, but I think it's really rough if they have to move him to there permanently because he'd really created a really good chemistry with Mitchell Pearce in the halves there, and they'd been doing really well. And we should also mention we cashed a same-game multi over $9 for this one. So very good Sunday, Dog Day Sunday. Moving on to the last game that we just saw. It's the Panthers beating the Titans 22 points to 14. Once again, we had the exact same bets on this one as we did against with the Bulldogs game previously. We get both up, and the Titans were up for this one as well. It was a tough spot for this Panthers side, and just once again, wet weather. It started raining a little bit more in the second half, it seemed, so there wasn't as many points in the second half. I think there was only 1 try from the Panthers in the second half. But the Titans were completely up for this one, and props to them. They really put in. They were down a couple, 3 tries to 1 early on, and at that point you can very easily fold. But at home, you generally do get a better performance out of these big underdogs, and that's what you did get here with the Titans. Tougher, this Panthers side, although we have them, for the minor premiership, that minor premiership bet, they're top of the ladder at the moment. They are, not depleted necessarily, but they are just, getting to that point where it's starting to become a little bit of an issue, the number of injuries that they have at the moment. So for the next month or so, missing Coruscant, missing a few outside backs, fullback, that kind of stuff. Once they get those guys back, they're going to be great. But until then, and, especially if they keep winning like they do, today, people are going to be like, oh, the Panthers don't need them, they're going to be absolutely fine. So maybe you can find a little bit of value going against the Panthers until they're full strength.
Bill Kickow was scratched before kickoff as well. So we got lucky with some scratchings this round, to be fair, because he's a very important forward, probably right up there with the Vicious Fish for leading their forward pack. And this game was interesting because the Panthers dominated field position. The tackles inside opponent 20 after an hour was 37-3.
Yeah.
The Titans' first try was a trap and scrap ball that ended up in Fogarty's hands, and he ran back 90 meters off a Panthers attacking grubber that I think pulled the game back to 6-all, right?
Yeah.
But then the Panthers piled on the pressure, another couple of tries, and we had plus 8.5. Panthers were up 12.
Well, the Titans scored 2 in like 3 minutes.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. In the final 3 minutes of the half, right. The Titans scored. They literally still didn't get down to the Panthers' end, but they kicked early in the count. Brian Kelly gets to the ball an inch before the dead ball line. That pulls the score back within 8, or within 6, in fact. So that was actually what the difference between winning and losing our first half bet.
Yep.
They actually got a penalty with a minute to go off the kickoff, got back up there and scored a dummy half try on the siren to pull it within 2. Then the rain came in the second half, and once again, the Titans were under siege all second half. So I want to give them a lot of credit for hanging tough, because that seems to be something that's been instilled by Holbrook, is that this team has a bit more character, a bit more toughness. And while they didn't really get the opportunity to win because they did concede a try that put them down 8 and they just barely could get out of their end until there was only 5 minutes left. But they hung in there, and we had plus 16.5. We're relatively safe in the poor conditions with a slightly understrength Penrith and a tough Titans that closed out, as I said, an 8-4 round that could have been even better.
Indeed it did, and that was the final game of the round, and once again another winning weekend. And look, it's been a crazy year. Like, we have just been absolutely on fire this year. I feel like we say every week, this is an unsustainable winning clip that we are winning at, but it just keeps happening. And maybe it's just one of those years where we just go gangbusters and keep winning for the rest of the season. But look, guys, thanks once again for tuning in to the recap. And if you want our tips for round 12 of the NRL, tune in. 6 p.m. We'll be live on Facebook to break down round 12. See you then.
Lego.